Yeah, about that. I don't have a good sense yet around the space, but there's no water and can't find it. Yeah. Getting ready for Yom Kippur, like channeling the inner fast and the deprivation. I was looking for a good cup of tea, but what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Okay. Okay. That's okay. Oh wow, we have a nice bunch of people online. Okay. All right. And we have, of course, our in-person crew. How's everybody doing? Happy New Year. Shana Tova. All right, let's let everybody in. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Good to see you guys. Okay.
There's like another building right there.
Right, let's see. Who do we have with us? Amy, welcome. Elizabeth, welcome. Lori and Sid, welcome. Sarah, welcome. How are you doing? And how's Florida doing? You're okay?
Yeah, Baruch Hashem, I think everybody's okay. I'm not sure. I couldn't find anything on the news about people being injured. But somebody told me most possibly there are injured people, but I didn't hear of it. So I hope everyone's fine.
Okay, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, good to see you. Glad you're safe and sound. Jeff, welcome. David, welcome. Karen and Mark and Lisa, also from Florida. Hope you're doing well. Hope everyone's okay over there. Safe and sound. All right. And of course, our in-person crew, welcome. It is great to see you all. Hey, welcome. No worries. Okay, so let's get started. We have so much to talk about tonight. Welcome back. This is our second session of High Holidays Unpacked. And the goal is to unpack the holidays. And what do I mean by unpacking the holidays? You know, when something's packed really well, it could be packed so well, you don't even know what's going on inside. You ever go to the airport and then they pull your bag and then they go through it? You ever have that experience? I can't.
We can't hear you, Rabbi.
Hey, sorry about that. Looks like I was muted also. We cut out when came back in, but thanks for letting me know. Basically, we're talking about like getting your bag pulled aside and a manual check and all that stuff. And sometimes you get the feeling that they don't even want to be looking through it, and they don't really unpack. They don't really unpack the bag, which is good, by the way. I'm not advocating for unpacking bags when there's nothing inside. However, what I am saying is that tonight, this is all about unpacking the energy of Yom Kippur, so that when we come up to that day that's coming up Tuesday night, Wednesday, that we are spiritually ready for the experience. All right, so that's the goal, and that is the agenda of these sessions. I want to thank our series sponsors, Elizabeth Alterman, Sid Smirnik, Eve and Jake Bogan, Mark Galt, Joy Gordman, Alex Pollock, Sarah Ingram, for helping sponsor this series. And of course, all of you for helping with your friendship and support of the Torah Center of Atlanta. It means a lot. And it's what helps us bring these classes to all of us. All right, so let's begin. The theme of today's class is, what does it mean to change? maybe it's just me, but have you ever had this? I'll just ask. We'll find out if it's just me or not. Have you ever had this feeling on Yom Kippur when you're standing and you're reciting the vidui, which is like the confessional prayers? You're like, for this sin, for that sin, for the other sin, I did this wrong, I did that wrong. So there's a few different feelings that we might have. Number one is, wow, it's a long list. Who's done all that stuff? I mean, it seems like a very long list to have done. But the truth is, whenever we confess, whenever we recite these confessional prayers and sin, we always recite it in the plural. In other words, for the sin that we have done, for this sin that we have committed, we. It's not about I, present company excluded. No, really, the meaning is that we recognize that maybe we have not individually engaged in any of these behaviors, but collectively, one of us has done it. There's a beautiful teaching that you may be familiar with. It's brought down in the good Jewish books. One of the Hebrew words for congregation is tzibur, and it's comprised of 3 Hebrew letters: Tzadik, Bet, and Resh. And tzibur, Tzadik, Bet, and Resh also is an acronym for 3 different types of people: Tzadikim, righteous, perfectly righteous; Beinanim, average; and Rishayim, individuals that could use a pick-me-up, could use a little bit of personal rehabilitation, and who is not in needing of some personal rehabilitation. Anyway, but tzibur, a community, really is comprised of all kinds. It really takes all kinds to have a community, and so the point here is that when we recite the confessional prayers, a lot of things may be going through our mind. The reason, again, why we're speaking about the confessional prayers is that is one of the major prayers of Yom Kippur. We say it 10 times throughout the Yom Kippur, throughout the 5 tefillot, the 5 prayers of Yom Kippur, that we're reciting the confessional prayers. And thus, we might have a feeling of, well, I didn't do that, but we all did that. And it takes all of us together to kind of, stand and just own up and be very transparent on this day. But then it's followed typically by me with another feeling. And that is, I wonder, the things that I need to work on, will I stand next year, Yom Kippur, and confess about the same things and be like, whoops, missed that one again. You ever have the feeling that it's like this kind of the same thing again and again and again? So the question really is, how sincere or how effective is the idea of teshuvah, the idea of kind of personal pivoting, if we kind of get a sense that it may not take permanently? Or put it in different words, give you a different scenario. Let's say, here's a scenario. Let's say somebody owes you $50,000, and you can't get a hold of them. They don't return your calls, return your emails. They're not being responsive. And you're like, you owe me 50. That's like a lot of money. Imagine they come to you one day and they say, I'm so sorry. I know you've been trying to get a hold of me, and I have your money, and they give you 5,000. What's your reaction? They owe you 50, you know it, they know it, and they just dropped you a 5. And they're like, here's 5. Like, very confidently. How are you feeling? Perhaps. Help me out. Yeah, slightly, about 45K, down. But, one reaction might be, well, at least I got 5. That's one possible reaction. But many of us might react by feeling a sense of 5,000. You expect me to feel good about $5,000? What about the 50? We might feel like 5,000 is nothing, babkas, compared to what the full amount. So tonight we're going to explore this. What is partial teshuvah effective? Is it all or nothing? Is it? How do we understand and make sense of this type of experience? So with that in mind, with that introduction in mind, let's study a Mishnah together. We're going to study a Mishnah. Text 1. All right, David, please read text number 1. This is from the tractate Yoma, which, if you're wondering, tractate Yoma is the tractate. It's all about Yom Kippur. Yoma means the day. It's Aramaic for the day, and it's Yom. It's all about Yom Kippur. This is actually the very last Mishnah. There's 8 chapters. And the very last Mishnah is this one right here. Take a look, please.
Yom Kippur atones for transgressions between a person and God. However, for transgressions between a person and another, Yom Kippur does not atone until they appeases the other person. Similarly, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah taught that point from the verse, "From all your sins you shall be cleansed before the Lord." The transgressions between a person and God, Yom Kippur atones. However, for transgressions between a person and another, Yom Kippur does not atone until he appeases the other person. In conclusion, Rabbi Akiva said, "How fortunate are you, Israel, before whom you are purified, and who purifies you? It is your Father in heaven, as it is stated, and I will sprinkle purifying water upon you, and you shall be purified." And it says, the ritual bath, the mikvah of Israel is God. Just as a ritual bath purifies the impure, so too the Holy One, blessed be he, purifies Israel.
Thank you. So let's pause here for a moment. And there's two major themes of the Mishnah. I would say the way I would break it down is the first two paragraphs are one theme, and then the last paragraph is a bit of a different theme. Let's focus on the first two paragraphs first. They are this is an unbelievable concept. So we all know that Yom Kippur, and I'm keeping it up here on the screen for those online, so you can just focus on this for a second. Everyone has it in front of them here. Everyone knows that Yom Kippur, of course, is the historical Day of Atonement. Originally, it became the Day of Atonement when God forgave the Jewish people for the sin of the golden calf. The day that the Jewish people were finally fully forgiven to the point that they received a second set of tablets. Remember the first set Moses smashed? We also, Charlton Heston, he picked up the, right? Those who will not live by the law shall die. And smash them. Okay, so, right. The movie, right. It's a great movie. Someone's got to redo. I feel like someone should redo that. It's ready for a redo. Can you imagine the special effects nowadays? That'd be amazing. Oh, be gewaltig. Anyway, so the first point is like this. When we talk about Day of Atonement, there's a massive asterisk, bigger than the one next to Barry Bonds' home run. Oh, sorry. All right. Anyway, this is a massive. Any baseball fans here? Barry Bonds. I remember when he was on the Pirates. Small guy. Anyway, back couldn't throw at Sid Bream in 1992, but that's neither here nor there. You know baseball. You know exactly. I'm from Pittsburgh, as it should be clarified at this point. Okay, so the asterisk here, we're talking about asterisk. What's the asterisk? The asterisk is that yes, Yom Kippur atones, but only for sins between, it cleanses the stuff between us and God. So God says, look, you stand before me, confess your sins, turn over a new leaf, you got this, I got this, we're good, it's all going to be good. But if you have a faribel, if you have some issue with Beryl, you got to deal with Beryl. I can't forgive you for Beryl. I'm not Beryl. I've used this example before in other contexts. There's a pretty famous book by Simon Wiesenthal called The Sunflower. And in it, he describes a real story that happened with him. It was during World War II, during World War II, during the Holocaust. And he was called over to a dying Nazi soldier's bedside, which is very strange. And he went over to this, and he showed up. And the Nazi said, I feel terrible remorse for participating in atrocities against your people. Will you forgive me? Please forgive me on behalf of those that I murdered. And Simon Wiesenthal writes in his book that he did not know what to say. He didn't say anything. He left. He didn't say yes, no, or he didn't say anything. And so he posed the question to great thinkers, religious leaders, ethicists, etc. What would you do? And the responses comprise the book called The Sunflower. That's the book. And by the way, Deborah Lipstadt, our very own Deborah Lipstadt from Emory University here in Atlanta. So she writes beautifully. She writes a response, a Jewish halachic perspective on this very question. And she writes unequivocally, of course you can't forgive the Nazi on behalf of all the people. He didn't hurt you. I mean, if he did, that's one thing. Fine. You can forgive someone for what they've done to you. You cannot forgive on behalf of someone else. Who gives you the license to forgive someone else? And the same thing is true with God. God says, I can't forgive you for what you did to Beryl. You got to go to Beryl for that. You hurt him. You got to go to him. How could I say we're good? How could I speak for him? Even God can't speak for someone else. Excellent question. So how do you, so let me repeat the question. The question is, so what if you want to make amends? What if you want to gain forgiveness, but the person that the aggrieved party is just not around, either in the case, let's say, in the extreme case of the book, right? Let's say people are no longer with us, or no longer among the living. Jewish law says that one should go to the cemetery. Literally, it says that, and ask for forgiveness by the gravesite. That's what it says. In other words, there's no such thing as I'm going to ask someone else, a third party. You got to go straight to the right party. How do you know if you're forgiven? I don't know. I understand that these are real questions. What if somebody in a less extreme case where they're no longer alive? Let's say someone is around, but they don't want to make themselves available, or they're not interested in that appeasement. That then Jewish law also steps in and says that it is it's the obligation of the one who may have hurt the other party to appease the aggrieved party 3 times. 3 times. When we learned this in school, it was like you have to ask for forgiveness 3 times. That's not what halakha says. Because I remember it was like, you forgive me? No, forgive me? No, forgive me? No. All right, I'm done. So it's not asking for forgiveness 3 times. It's actually appeasing. It's doing efforts, making efforts of appeasement 3 times in 3 different ways. Flowers, chocolate. What's the third way? I don't know. Whatever, but it's like foot massage. There you go. There you go. Right? Good. So you have very good. So you have right. There's but halakha said, the Rambam says you have to go different ways, different avenues. Yeah. No. Okay. Fine. So that's point. And to me, this is really powerful. Yom Kippur is all about a new leaf, cleansing, all of the stuff, all of the schmutz, all of the stuff that's not so nice, any stains to kind of, get that out. And there's 2 elements. There's our relationship with God. That's one thing. I liken to that to our relationship with ourselves. Really, when we fall short in our spiritual, efforts. So that's between us and God, i.e. between us and our own self, our own soul, our own conscience, right? So that's that. So that's one level that we can, make amends for. But the other one is with another human being. And that happens with a conversation with the other. Now, here's what's interesting. So that's the first half of the Mishnah. I'm going to put this back up on the screen here. Because the second half of the mission is what I really want to focus on. So look at this. Rabbi Akiva says, just going to repeat Rabbi Akiva's words. Ashreichem Yisrael. Ashreichem Yisrael. How fortunate are you, Israel? Before whom are you purified, and who purifies you? It's your Father in heaven. Seems to be like kind of just speaking very fluffy language. He quotes a verse from Ezekiel where God says, I will sprinkle purifying water upon you, and you shall be purified.
Is this the origin of baptism?
I was just thinking that. Like, I remember those Sunday morning shows where they would hit somebody in the forehead, they would fall back, would be caught. I don't know. Sprinkle purifying water upon you. And they no. Oh my gosh. You're saying because social distancing. Wow. I'm just thinking super soaker. Remember those? That was big. 50. I had a super soaker back in the original. I wish I kept that. It'd probably be worth money, or at least good to, at least fun. That's very least. That would be great for the glasses, right? 50. I think I had a 50-foot super soaker. That would be great. That we should maybe adopt that. It's funny because we have like 2 mikvahs right here, which, by the way, we're speaking on mikvah tonight. We have 2 mikvahs right here. We go in the water. I don't know, the sprinkling. But then look how he concludes it. He quotes another verse from Jeremiah, from Yirmiyahu Hanavi, the prophet Jeremiah. It says, the ritual bath of Israel is God. In other words, God is our mikvah. Okay, I've heard God call many things, but a mikvah is interesting. And then he explains, just as a ritual bath purifies the impure, so too the Holy One blessed be purifies Israel. Okay, interesting. But what does it mean? What does it mean? Let's take a look at text number 2. Let's take a look at text number 2, because in truth, the Rebbe has this very question on the meaning of the statement of Rabbi Akiva. Take it away. Let me scroll over here. Yeah, text number 2.
What is Rabbi Akiva's innovation? It is plainly obvious that Hashem is the one who grants purification for a Jew's sin, as is clearly stated in countless verses throughout Scripture.
What's he saying? What's Rabbi Akiva saying? Remember, Rabbi Akiva is no small potatoes. He's like one of the greatest scholars of all time. And he says, you know who purifies you? God. Yeah, it's like we know that. It's like, why is that? Why is this like such a, and he likens it to a mikvah? I like that. You're right. See,
Somebody who saw you for your sin against God
very interesting. So what you're saying is it's going the other way. After the first half of the Mishnah says that you got to speak to your fellow human being, you should know that at the end of the day, God is still the one to purify. So we turn it back to that direction. Hey, Mike, good to see you. Okay, good. The Rebbe's question is, along the lines of, we kind of know that it's God who's doing the purification, although, as was pointed out, sometimes it's not so obvious. In some spiritual religious traditions, it's not so obvious. Nonetheless, it seems like in Torah, it's pretty clear. In fact, let's take a look at text number 3. Let's continue down the line.
Why are you making such a big deal of this? It's obvious.
You're saying what the Rebbe is asking? Yes.
This is so obvious. Why are you making it?
So why are you making a big deal? It's obvious that God forgives, that God is the one who grants atonement. We know this from many sources. It's like Rabbi Akiva says, like, you know what I just realized? God is the one who does atonement. Okay. There must be a reason. And in fact, we are going to discover something that is absolutely amazing. By the way, you should know, it's the way the conclusion is, I just want to point that out as far as a learning technique. Typically in the Rebbe, in the Lubavitcher Rebbe's works, the questions are never dead ends. They're always redirections. It's like you thought that Rabbi Akiva was telling you that God is the one who's doing it. That's way too obvious. Let's keep on looking. In other words, there has to be something else that he's telling us, because it can't be so simple. Tova, please read text number 3, which is one of those verses from Scripture where we see that God obviously is the one who's doing the forgiving. Thank you. And you should know, I believe this is even quoted in the Yom Kippur liturgy. I'm very confident that it is. It's a powerful thing. God says, you think I want the death of the wicked? You think I want that people should not be in a good place? Of course not. I want things should be good. I want shuvah. I want everyone should get to a better place. That's really what it is. All right. Then I'm going to ask one more question. And this second question is really going to be one that points us into hopefully the right direction. And there's nothing to, take a look back at text number 1. at the end of text 1, which was the Mishnah, we're doing a deep dive into the Mishnah. So at the end of text 1, Rabbi Akiva says the following, the last 2 lines. Just as a ritual bath purifies the impure, so too the Holy One, blessed be, purifies Israel. So there's 2 words that can be understood to be superfluous. The 2 words I'm referring to are the impure. So imagine if those words, the impure, were missing. And let's read it without those 2 words. Let's see if it makes sense. Just as a ritual bath purifies, so too the Holy One, blessed be, purifies Israel. It works. It works. It's like we did a science experiment. It works. I joke with my kids. I'm like, certain words have extra letters, in my opinion. Like library. You need 2 R's. Library. Done. What's wrong with right? That's it. I'm like, library. You're saying there's even more extra letters?
The 2 R's.
No, I know that. No, that's my point.
He's saying you don't need this.
That's what I'm saying. I know. My joke with my kids is that it's just an extra R for no reason. No, I'm saying, imagine we created a new word, library. Like, who created the word? Why are they throwing in 2 R's? I know etymologically there might be a reason for it. All right, listen. My kids at least. No, the point is like this. I'm always like, let's go to the library. I make it like library. I'm like, all right, yeah, library. The point is that sometimes you have words that are superfluous, and it makes sense without it. I know in this case it doesn't, but here, just as a ritual bath purifies, so too the Holy One, blessed be, purifies. And if you read in the Hebrew, I'll read in the Hebrew. Ma mikvah mitaher, afakadosh baruch hu mitaher Yisrael. Just like a mikvah is mitaher, purifies. Afakadosh baruch hu mitaher Yisrael. So too God mitaher. So why does it have to say esatmeim, the impure? Who else are you purifying? Of course, you're purifying the impure. Just as a ritual bath purifies the impure, so too God purifies Israel. All right, we get it. Just as a ritual bath purifies, God purifies. Just leave it at that. Why say the impure? Now, that seems like a very random question to ask, but not if you have a really good answer. And we have a really good answer. And the answer is going to be based on a very quick introduction into the laws of ritual purity and impurity. And this is very important. Okay, what are the laws of ritual purity and impurity? So first of all, disclaimer number 1, most of the laws of ritual purity and impurity we do not practice today. The reason is because the ramification for most of the laws pertaining to ritual purity and impurity, in other words, what it affects is originally is primarily our ability to go to the temple, Temple Mount area, into the temple, to bring sacrifices, to eat of the sacrificial meat, etc. There's most of the laws of ritual purity and impurity pertain to our sacred relationship with sanctuary life, with temple life. For the last 2,000 years or so, we haven't had a temple. So which means that we haven't had, there hasn't been like, oh, you touched a dead rat. Oh, you gotta like do this whole thing to be able to go to the temple. There's no temple. So it's not like, not that it's irrelevant, but it's not as relevant as it once was. Also, another reason is because all of us are pretty much presumed to have come in contact with death, human death. And coming in contact with human death requires, for purification, the ash mixture of the red heifer, which can only be formulated when there is a temple standing. And at this point, the last 1900 plus years, there's no temple, therefore no red heifer mixture, therefore no purification from coming in contact with death. By the way, lest you think, well, I never touched a dead body, even being in the same building as someone who's deceased would render one impure on that level of ritual impurity. So even if one goes to a hospital, right, even if one visits a hospital, and the assumption is that somewhere in the hospital, there's someone who's not alive. Even if we're driving down the highway, theoretically, conceptually, and there's a tree that overhangs both the cemetery and the road, it can render one in a state of impurity. Yeah, it's legit. So there's ways. There's coming in contact with coming in contact with death in the sense that it makes one impure is touching, but it's also under the same roof cover, so to speak. Yeah. That's a very good question. That's a very good question. A cemetery, that's a very good question. And I'm not going to answer. So the question is, just to repeat it for everyone online, is a Kohen traditionally does not, tries to avoid it all as much as possible going to a cemetery for this reason of not coming in contact with death. A Kohen is, kind of, elite status, special ops, that sort of thing. Kohen, tries to shy away from that. So the question that's asked is a Kohen also not, does a Kohen also stay away from hospitals? So you're right, Dr. Cohen. I'm sure there's a Dr. Right? Like Dr. Cohen, Dr. Katz. Anyway, Katz, Katz stands for Kohen Tzedek, an acronym for Kohen Tzedek. So yeah, you meet a Katz, they're originally Kohanim. Assuming that it's, all the way through, it's going to be the case. Now, so the answer is, again, there's nothing definitive here. This is not an actual ruling on Jewish law, but cemetery is for sure coming in contact with death. Hospital is a presumption, so it's a little bit of a less thing. Now, the question really is, could a Kohen be a surgeon and, be operating in, very serious cases, and then, that sort of thing. I know, right. Yeah, that's right. It's also true, for sure. But yes, to save a life, yes. So that would be the other factor. So in Judaism, you always are weighing one factor against the other factor, like one obligation is. So there's an obligation to try to avoid coming in contact with death. There's also an obligation to save a life if one can. So in this case, this Dr. Cohen's obligation to save a life would kind of override the other. Yes. So that does something, right? That does some element, but in original Jewish law, it would require the ash of a red heifer for full purification. But here's the caveat: that's for full purification to enter the temple. We're not hanging out at the temple, right? So now, for this reason, you should know, even though there are tours that go to the Temple Mount itself, not by the Western Wall. Western Wall is still outside, but on top of the Temple Mount, there are many who won't do that for this reason. For the reason of, I may be in a state of impurity, and I've never had a red heifer, I'm not going to go to the Temple Mount because that space still retains its holiness to this day.
But aren't all of us effectively always in a state of impurity anyway?
Yes, we assume that. Correct. Now, right. Right. I'm trying to be nice. Yeah, we're basically presumed to be in a state of ritual impurity. Now, with that being said, there are different forms of ritual impurity. So this general introduction is to say that most of ritual impurity does not. Most ritual impurity does not have a practical effect today. Now, there is one form, just a caveat or a disclaimer or an important clarification. There is, of course, the laws of family purity, which are also about purity and impurity, and that does affect the immediate relationship between husband and wife, and that, of course, is in practice to this day, and that's where mikvah comes in. One of the areas in which a women's mikvah would come in. Now, that being said, let's talk about different forms of ritual impurity. Not all types of impurity are the same. So, for example, give you an easy example. If someone touches a dead rodent, right? Someone touches a dead rodent. Someone touches a dead rat or mouse or something. Kind of gross. All right. Not recommending it, but let's say it happens. So, according to Jewish law, one becomes impure for 1 day. 1 day, upon which they would go to the mikvah, and then they would become purified. you have to wait a day, and then you go to mikvah, and then you're done. Now, what if somebody came in contact with a dead body? It would require 7 days and the ashes of a red heifer. Another example is with the case of Zav, and that's what we have over here. Okay? Case of Zav. And I'm going to read some of this text. Text 4a, 4b. Okay, this comes from Maimonides. Doesn't come from Maimonides, but this text comes from Maimonides. These are Jewish laws in the Mishnah and the Talmud based on scriptural verses from the book of Leviticus, book of Vayikra. A Zav is a man who has an unhealthy venereal discharge. And the law is that as long as this discharge is discharging, he is in an active state of impurity. After it ceases, he waits 7 days and needs to go to the mikvah. Okay, that's Zav. Let's read this inside. I'll read this inside. Text 4a. A Zav is one of the primary sources of impurity. Oh, let me put this up on the screen. Okay. This is text 4a. A Zav is one of the primary sources of impurity. During all the days when a Zav experiences Zav just discharges, again, that's an unhealthy, like a diseased venereal discharge, he is ritually impure. When the Zav discharges cease, he counts 7 clean days, immerses himself on the 7th day, and waits until nightfall. On the 8th day, he brings his sacrifice. Again, this is in times of the temple. If he had experienced 3 discharges throughout the time period that he was in that state of unhealthy discharge, if there were 3 different sets of discharges, then he would actually bring a sacrifice in addition to going to the mikvah. 3 or more. Yeah, 3 or more. Now, so what is Zav? Let's take a look at 4b. Let's get a clarification of the terms. Okay, the term Zav, used by the Torah, refers to a discharge of sperm that is released because of an internal sickness that affects the organs of the body in which it collects, in contrast with viable sperm. Basically, an unhealthy venereal discharge. That's basically what Maimonides is. That's basically what the law is talking about. Basically, yeah. Now, which one? I don't know. But halacha talks about the color and the consistency, etc. And is it actually sperm or is it coming from the same, etc.? These are right. But it's coming from there, and that's what he says. It's not viable sperm. It's not actual. Right. Now, text 5, we talk about something else. And by the way, this is something that's will explain the men's mikvah, which is right over here. I don't know that I want to read it from text 5. Let me give a little bit of background. Jewish law says that when a man experiences a seminal discharge, not the unhealthy venereal, but a seminal discharge, the man is rendered in a state of impurity until he goes to mikvah. So back in the day when there was a temple, you would have to go to the mikvah. Ezra, who was Ezra? Ezra was the head of the rabbinical court at the times of the Second Temple. He made a takana. He made an edict. He made a decree that a man who had a similar mission should not study Torah until he goes to the mikvah. Okay? And that's what this text is talking about over here. So I'm going to read this and I'm going to throw in some explanations. All the ritually impure need only wash their hands in order to pray, just like those not in such a state. So we were talking about washing hands, right? So before we pray, it's a custom to wash the hands. By the way, the hand washing would be not for the bread where you go multiple times on each hand, but more of the alternating 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. Which, by the way, explains why in the shul, as you may have noticed, there are sinks outside the bathrooms that have washing cups. It's not only for the kiddush on Shabbos, if there's challah, but it's also before davening. And you'll notice people that are familiar, that are doing hand washing, or at least rinsing their hands before prayer. Even if they're able to immerse themselves in mikvah and ascend from their impure state, this immersion is not required for prayer. You don't have to go to mikvah before you pray, just have to wash hands. We've already explained second paragraph. We've already explained that Ezra was the head of the rabbinical court at the time of the Second Temple. Ezra decreed that only one who has had a seminal emission is prohibited from Torah study until he has immersed himself in the mikvah. The rabbinical court that existed afterward decreed that this applies even to prayer, i.e., such a person alone should not pray until he immerses himself in mikvah, which is why many men have the custom, preemptively or not preemptively, to go to mikvah. Hence the men's mikvah. So you'll see many men go to mikvah in the morning before davening, and it's based on this area of Jewish law. That if there's a seminal emission or a possible seminal emission, it's a seminal emission, etc., then a man should go to the mikvah before davening, before studying Torah, etc. Make sense?
So the origin of mikvah.
That's one of the cases where it's used. That's one of the cases where it's used for men. There are cases where it's used by women. There's usually two different mikvahs, just to keep everything separate. Again, right here, there's a men's mikvah, and at the end of the parking lot, there's a women's mikvah. Right here on location. Maybe we should do a tour one day of the mikvah. No, yeah, that's what I said. Yes, knock on the door, correct. No. Remember that show? Hey, what's going on? Remember that show, Cops? What you gonna do when they come for you, right? Yeah, let's not do that. Okay, good. Now, here's the question. By the way, all of this was setting up a very specific scenario. Okay, and let me explain the scenario. Imagine there's a man who has had an unhealthy venereal discharge, and it stopped, and now he's in his 7-day holding period until he can go to mikveh and become ritually purified. You with me on this? So he had his unhealthy discharges, that's over, 7 days. And in the middle of the 7 days, he has a normative seminal discharge, seminal emission. So the question is, should he go to mikvah? Because that's only a 1-day thing. Should he go to mikvah and be purified from that if he anyway has, let's say, 4 more days on the larger scale impurity? Does my question make any sense? Yeah. In other words, if you have a larger looming impurity period, right? And then you have like a minor impurity in the interim that you can get rid of, should you get rid of the little thing if you anyway are not going to be purified until you wait the full 7 days and go to mikvah? Is there any reason to the smaller one? Halacha says, Jewish law says you would. Take a look. Yeah, hold on. I'm just putting this up on the screen. Yeah, here we go. 6a. Eve, please read 6a. In other words, even the Zav, who anyway has he's still waiting for several more days. But if he has a seminal emission, which causes him only some sort of minor impurity for 1 day, he should go to mikvah, even though that mikvah is not going to help for the larger thing. See what's going on here? What we're saying is that a mikvah purifies a little bit, even if it can't purify all the way. Does that make sense? You with me on this? Not. Isn't that like you're saying tainting the mikvah? It's like defining. That's the point. You could have seen it as chutzpah. What are you doing going to the mikvah? Who are you? Wait till you're done and then go. You know what it's like? It's like coming with $5,000 and you owe 50. It's like, who does that? That's where I was going with all this, right? It's like, yeah. But that was a healthy mission. In other words, the 7 day, it's 7 days from when an unhealthy discharge happens then you have to wait 7 days. In the interim, you had a normal, one had a normal, healthy seminal emission. That doesn't trigger another 7 days. That's just a 1 day thing. And that gets swallowed, as it were, amid the other 7 days. That doesn't bump it out. Now, if the person had an unhealthy venereal discharge during that 7 days, yeah, that would reset the clock, and then you got to wait till that's done, and then extend it from there. But the point really here is that if there's a larger impurity, when I say larger, a more serious, longer term impurity, and then you have a more minor, shorter term impurity, Jewish law says, take care of the small thing, even though you haven't taken care of the big thing. In other words, you might say it's all or nothing. Either I get rid of the whole thing or I'm wasting my time. And Jewish law says, no. If you can take care of a little bit, if you can take care of a small thing, even though there's a larger thing that still hasn't been rectified, take care of the smaller thing. Take care of what you can. Correct. But it also means that the $5,000 that you take shouldn't be thrown back in the face either. In other words, we can all do what we want. That's already. But when it comes to our spiritual purity and purification, the message here is, and this is really a powerful thing, the message here is that there's a way to, there's not only a way, but there's a path for purification, even as we haven't been fully purified. Now, let's read this inside. Let's read. There's another example about the red heifer, but we're going to skip that. Okay, let's go all the way to text 8. But before we read text 8, let me explain what's going on here. So basically, this is a deeper understanding. We asked before, what did Rabbi Akiva mean when he said that a mikvah purifies the impure? Purify, of course, is purifying the impure. That seems superfluous. It should have said a mikvah purifies. Why say a mikvah purifies the impure? So listen to this new novel way of understanding it. It's unbelievable. A mikvah purifies the impure, meaning someone who's still going to be impure after the mikvah. You with me on that? I'll say it again. When Rabbi Akiva says, "Ma mikvah metaras atmeim," the mikvah purifies the impure, means the mikvah purifies even one who will still be impure after they go to the mikvah, because they have a larger impurity still outstanding. But it still purifies a little bit. We don't say that, listen, if you're not purified all the way, then nothing is happening. You're wasting your time. You're disrespecting the mikvah. We don't say that. What we say is, go to the mikvah. The mikvah will help in this one area, even though it may not help with the large area, but this area, it will help. Let's read this inside. Check if you don't mind reading. Let me put this up on the screen. Text number 8.
So does God purify the Jewish people. With these words, he alludes to the idea that mikvah purifies those who remain impure even after immersion. In other words, the mikvah also works for only partial purification. In similar fashion, God purifies the Jewish people. But you shouldn't think that when they eat shua from the portion of their sins, that God will not accept such a part of the shua. This is not true. The same way mikvah purifies those who remain impure, God grants partial purification even to a Jew who will remain impure from the effect of most.
Think about it this way. Thank you. Think about it this way. Imagine a person stands in Yom Kippur and really feels remorse and really wants to change one particular area. But there's other areas that the person's not ready to fix up. This could be in a relationship with God. By the way, it could be in a relationship with human beings. So there's an area in which we've fallen short, and we know that we've fallen short, and we want to get better in that area. But what about all those other areas? You might say, you know what? I don't even have the chutzpah, the brazenness to say I'm sorry for this. If I know that I'm not addressing the other stuff, that's embarrassing. I'm going to show up. The other one's going to say, like, that's what you're bringing to the table? That 5,000 is what you're bringing to the table? What about the full amount? What's going on? And that might hold us back from even showing up in the first place. We might say, if I can't take care of everything, I'm too embarrassed to offer this. So we think about New Year's resolutions, right? This year I'm going to do this mitzvah a little bit better. By the way, that was the Chabad Rebbes would always advocate, is that the right word? They would always suggest that before Rosh Hashanah or high holiday season, take on not necessarily a new mitzvah, but take on a resolution to do a mitzvah that you're already doing a little bit better. A little bit better, whatever that means to you. I don't know how you define better. A little more intention, a little bit more focus, a little bit more time, a little bit more whatever. Maybe encourage someone else to do that mitzvah also, tailor with you, whatever it is. The point is that a person, we might show up and say to ourselves, is it, I'm going to do this one mitzvah. What about all the other stuff? I got all this other stuff, all this other baggage, all this other stuff that I need to fix up. It feels almost embarrassing sometimes. It might feel embarrassing to step up and only be holding 5K, only be holding one thing out of a larger thing. I'm offering you this, whereas the other stuff is still looming, is still outstanding. And Jewish law is clear on the matter when it comes to mikvah. When it comes to the mikvah purifies someone who's still going to remain impure. And as the Rebbe says, what this means in a spiritual sense is God purifies us. God forgives us for what we bring to the table when we sincerely say, "Listen, I did this. I'm remorseful. I realize it's not healthy for me. It's not a good thing. I'm resolving this year to doing this better, or not doing that at all." God says, accept it with full love and full embrace and pure, full love, full embrace and full purification. Not like, really? Can we talk about this other stuff? You walk into an office and you're like, all right, I want to talk about this agenda. Okay, great. What about all this other stuff? I got a whole pile of stuff to talk about. God doesn't do that to us. God says, you're bringing this, I'm accepting this.
Us and that's achievable almost 11%. We address but like we don't even know sometimes, like we can't recall sometimes all of our transgressions and stuff. We live in a past thought, whatever, somebody forgot to leave traffic and I'm taking up anything.
Right. Yeah. Asking for a friend. Right.
So then no matter what we do, you're still in church some degree.
Exactly. And that makes, I agree with the premise of your question, of your point. And the premise is that who amongst us can stand up and say, I only have this thing to fix in our relationship with God. I just this. So when we come with whatever we come with, we know that there's much more. But I think it's even when we can articulate the other things, but we're just not ready to address them yet within ourselves. It's like, okay, I know there's a few areas in which I really need to step up my game. This year, I'm ready to address this one issue. A person might internally, we might not even be aware of it. We might be hesitant to even do that. The one thing, if we know that there's three other things that we're ignoring, because like, what does that say about us? That we're only mentioning this and like trying to pretend that doesn't exist. And what Rabbi Akiva is saying is, don't let that get in the way. Don't box yourself out in your head, telling yourself my little change is not valuable enough before God. Ma mikvah mataras hatmeim. A mikvah is good to purify even someone who has a much bigger problem to address. But the little problem, it works. Hashem is ready to accept us and accept our offer, our whatever, how big or small that is. Hashem is ready to accept it unconditionally. And that encourages us to make that move, to step up and actually make that first move to improve. By the way, and I'll tell a story. We'll conclude the class not right now, but in a few minutes, I'll tell a story along those lines. The idea of taking steps, small steps to achieve and accomplish something much greater. One more point about this topic. We've explained the Mishnah in the sense we've explained Rabbi Akiva's beautiful statement. I asked before, we all know that God is the one who purifies. Yeah, but the point here is what Rabbi Akiva is bringing to the table is God purifies even those who will remain impure. God accepts us and all of our chest, banging, even when he knows that there's more stuff that we need to fix up. Even when we know there's more stuff to fix up, God accepts us where we're at and with what we bring to the table. And that's what Rabbi Akiva is saying. That's why he says, Ashreichem Yisrael, how fortunate you, Israel. Because who's the one that's purifying you? And he says, Avinu Shabashamayim, our Father in heaven. Avichem Shabashamayim, your Father in heaven. And now we'll focus on that phrase, your Father in heaven. Your Father in heaven. Why does he specify your Father in heaven? Why Father? This too holds a very powerful message. So I want to read a few texts over here and add a few comments. Let me pull up the text over here on the screen once again. Let's take a look at text number 10. Okay, this comes from Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, and he writes this in Tanya in his section all about Teshuvah. So he writes like this: the mitzvah of Teshuvah. This is page 10. Text number 10, page 182. He says the mitzvah of Teshuvah, according to the Torah, is simply to abandon the sin. In other words, a person must firmly resolve in their heart to never return to such foolishness, to rebel against God's kingship, and never again violate any of the king's commands, whether positive or negative mitzvah. So based on that text, how do you read it? How do you read that text? When a person is trying to make amends, do tshuva for something that they did wrong, is it about pledging and committing to never do that again, or to never do anything wrong again? Which one is it based on that text? Anything. The second one. In other words, it's not just abandoning that sin. He then ups the ante. He says a person must firmly resolve in their heart to never return to such foolishness, and never again violate any of the king's commands, whether positive or negative mitzvah. That's much bigger. Think about it in a relationship. Think about a husband and wife. So let's say the husband does something that is upsetting to the wife, something inconsiderate, something that was what's the word I'm looking for? It was not kind. It was not putting the other one as first priority, etc. And the husband says, I apologize for doing X, Y, and Z, this thing. Okay, that's nice. But if you're going to still do something else, what kind of apology is that? Right? It's like, I'm sorry for coming home later than I said I would. Okay, that's one thing. But what if it's something else that's keep on going? In other words, like, what if there's something else still that's going to happen that reflects the same type of lack of putting the other one first in the relationship, or putting the relationship first before personal needs?
Like you went to the casino to gamble.
Exactly. So I didn't come. I write. Thank you. Hey, Mom. Good to see you. So my mom and I go to Vegas every. That's why she said. I'm kidding. You guys are taking me seriously. No, we don't go to Vegas. Of course not. It's Atlantic City, obviously. Still a joke. So right, it's like I won't come home late, but I got this gambling. I'm going to be gone for the game. It's still not putting. So what's the point? The point is the Rambam says, sorry, not the Rambam. This is the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe says that Shuvah means I'm not going to do this, nor anything else hurtful. I'm not going to do this, but other things. Oh, I didn't say I wouldn't. How's that Shuvah? How is that right? Shuvah means this. I know this hurts you. I'm not going to do this, nor will I really care about you. I'm in a moment of honest care about you. I won't do this or anything else that hurts you. Based on this, it seems like it is all or nothing. Shuvah is all or nothing. If I'm holding anything in my back pocket, it's not real shuvah. And yet, we just said that if you come to God and say, I'm sorry for this, this one thing, I'm working on this one thing, that God does forgive for that one thing. Even though we have an obligation to clean up our act totality, but God still forgives, God still accepts whatever we bring. It's like a paradox. We should be bringing everything, but if we only bring one thing, God accepts it. How do we understand that? So the Rebbe explains that's why Rabbi Akiva in the Mishnah says, because who's purifying us? Our Father in heaven. From a legal perspective, it's all or nothing. But when you're dealing with a parent Parent will take whatever they, no, that sounds too defeatist. But a parent will, because of the love, a parent will accept a child no matter what they bring to the table. You bring me a little thing, doesn't matter. I love you. I'm accepting. That's the message. That's the big message of this Mishnah in the final analysis. And this I wish to read as well. This will be text 11. Hold on. Not text 11, text 13b. 13b, 188. Don't worry, everything we skipped, I paraphrased. There's a wonderful message in the words of Rabbi Akiva. A Jew comes to God and says, and states, God, I don't have the energy or the time to feel bad about everything I've done. I love that. But that's honest. That's very honest. Listen, I don't have the space to deal with all the stuff I need to fix. I only have a few available minutes to feel bad and regret these particular wrongdoings that are particularly troubling. It's like, this is all I got. Sorry, God. It's all I got. A Jew could be discouraged and assume that God doesn't accept such a tshuva. By the way, according to halacha, we're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to hold on to stuff like, all right, I'm still going to the casino, but I won't come home. You're supposed to put everything on the table. And you might assume that if I'm not doing that, if I'm not putting all my cards out, that I should not do any of it. Rabbi Akiva says no. Back and said, how fortunate are we, the Jewish people? A Jew is so fortunate that when God sees a Jew making even the slightest move in whatever area they choose, God immediately forgives, God purifies the Jewish people. And why? Because Hashem is our Father. Avichem Shavashamayim, He's your Father in heaven. And a father doesn't, hopefully, parent does not stand on ceremony saying, no, you didn't do it the right way. Another relationship, it might work like that. But a parent to a child, parents always open to the child. All right, with this, I want to conclude with this story. The story is a beautiful story, and it's with the Alter Rebbe, the same author that we just read, the founder of Chabad. So the Alter Rebbe was very much involved in the mitzvah Pidyon Shvuyim, which means redeeming captives. Back in the day, people were kidnapped and held captive for ransoms. There were debtor persons, all sorts of things where Jews needed to be, and others, of course, but within the Jewish community, Jews needed to be released from captivity. And the community would rally together and put together the funds to redeem them. The Alter Rebbe, as the leader of his community, was very active in fundraising and raising money to redeem these individuals that were in prison. So he was going around. He went to a city once to raise money for this mitzvah. And he spoke to some of the rabbis in the city, and he said, I want to go with you, the local community, local leadership. And he said, let's go to such and such house. I hear he has money. They said, don't bother. That guy doesn't give. He's the miser. Don't go to him. He doesn't give. Alter Rebbe says, no, we're going to go. And he says, not only are we going to go, but as they approach the front door, he says, here are the rules. There's two other rabbis. He says, you guys don't say anything. No matter what happens, you don't say a word. Just remain still, super quiet. They knock on the door. The wealthy man answers. And the Alter Rebbe, he invites them in, they sit down, they have some tea. The Alter Rebbe explains the case about the family and the need and etc. to redeem the person in captivity. And the man is sympathetic, and he says, I feel it's really tugging at my heartstrings. He says, wait here, I'm going to help out. He goes to another room, comes back with a velvet pouch, opens the pouch and hands the Alter Rebbe one rusty penny. I'm sure it wasn't a penny, but like the basic currency coin, one rusty coin. You should know this was the same rusty coin that he'd given to everybody who had shown up at his house. And it always thrown back at him. The Alter Rebbe took the coin. He smiled graciously. He thanked him profusely. He gave him blessings, maybe blessed with this, that, and the other for participating in this mitzvah. And he headed to the door. And the other rabbis, as they walked out, like, what the guy gave you that you should throw back? And said, shh, we had a deal. They kept on walking. As they were down the stairs, the man comes back. He says, where? Come back in. Tell me again the need. This time he gives them 1,000. The need was 5,000 coins. Now this time he gives them 1,000 coins. The Alter Rebbe once again heaps on praises and blessings and everything, and they leave. And the rabbis say, "What happened? What's going on?" Shh. Nothing. Silence. That's the deal. No murmuring, no talking. We're walking. They start walking away again. Once again, the wealthy man comes back out and calls them back in, sits them down, hears it again, hears the whole story again. This time he comes back with a full amount. He pays the entire ransom. He gives them the entire amount of money. Then the rabbis leave. And now the Alter Rebbe is ready to talk. And he says to them as follows. He says, this man was always generous. He started off with 1 coin, but no one ever accepted the coin. He wanted to be generous. He didn't necessarily know how exactly to be generous. He started with 1 coin, but no one ever accepted the coin. They always threw it back at him. He never felt what it means to give and to feel the blessing of giving. And so it never stirred any more giving. He always tried to give the same coin and it never worked. And so everyone assumed he was a miser. But when we accepted the coin with love and with gratitude, without judgment, so then that encouraged him to want to give more, that stirred his inner sense of giving and generosity. And he felt motivated to give the full amount. The message for us is that if we stop at step 1 because we feel like it's not enough, then we're never going to get anywhere. If we don't show up on Yom Kippur with anything, it's just like, God's not going to accept this little thing. I got all this other stuff. God's not going to want my rusty coin. I'm too embarrassed to even show up with that. Then you know what? Then nothing will change. Let's show up with what, as the Rebbe said, whatever little energy we have, whatever, I can only feel bad about this one thing. Great. Perfect. Don't discount the 1 coin that you got. Give that coin. And God accepts it graciously. And then when we're ready, we'll give another. Never hold back from that first step because the journey seems so daunting. To quote a Chinese proverb, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, first step. That Judaism has been around for 3,600 years, and Chinese society has been around for about 2,300 years. So for 1,000 years, Jews had no Chinese food. You know what they call that? The Dark Ages. My friends, the moral of the story, I don't know if any of those numbers I know the Jewish numbers are accurate. I have no idea about that. So it's just a joke, not accuracy. So with that being said, on that note, let's remember the main theme of tonight's class, as Rabbi Akiva says in the Mishnah, the end of Tractate Yoma, literally the final words from the Mishnah on Yom Kippur. Rabbi Akiva has the floor. He's got the mic, and he does quite the mic drop. He says, we are fortunate because the one forgiving us is not some justice, justice, Father in heaven. Our Father in heaven will take whatever we got out of love and pure embrace, pure acceptance. So never shy away from that first step because we feel it's not big enough. It's like we're embarrassed to show up with this. Show up with whatever you got, even if it's something that you think is small. Show up with that 1 small coin, with that 1 small mitzvah, because there's nothing small about change. 1 pivot is valuable in and of itself and can lead to an incredible change altogether. Thank you very much for joining me for our second session of High Holidays Unpacked. Next week, thank you. Next week, same bad time, same bad channel. We talk about Sukkot and Simchat Torah, and we finally figure out what's the key to true and pure joy. That's next week. Shana Tova. Yes.
Based on tonight's discourse, there's nothing here that says I should not.
Correct.
So.
Correct. So many men have the custom to go to mikveh every single day. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's certainly within the Hasidic community, there's a custom to go to mikveh every single morning. the exception of like Yom Kippur or whatever, but otherwise, you go to mikvah. Erev Yom Kippur. Yeah, 3 times. The custom is to go 3 times Erev Yom Kippur, at least once. But many have the custom to go 3 times. Morning, in the morning, before the morning prayers. Maybe even before the kaparas, chicken twirling contest. Then, not exactly. Then there's before mincha and then after mincha. But at least once. Yeah. Many women go also, Erev Yom Kippur, to the mikvah. Anyway, different customs. All right. Make sense? Mom, it's great to see you. All right. It's the power of Zoom. It's fantastic.
Yes, I was being a little bit modest because of the topic of discussion.
Oh, no worries. No worries. We're it's great to have you here. All right, friends.
I sent everybody a message.
Oh, good. Gemara Chasima Tova. Everyone should be signed, sealed, delivered for a good year. And I would like, if I can mention a few words. Mike, Mike's wife Amy's mother passed away. I think Friday she passed away. So Shabbat, wow. So I want to wish condolences to Amy and Mike and the whole mishpacha. And yeah, wishing you long life and blessings, and of course all the support and the love we have for you. And yeah, lots of blessings. All right. We'll see you guys. Have a wonderful evening. Laila Tov, Shabbat Shalom. See you guys soon.
Thank you, Ari.
Pleasure. We'll see you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure. See you guys.
Love you.
Love you too.